sources and methods.
I'm going to have to cut you off there, Professor. We're going to go back and hear Justice Hogue. Sorry about that.
Understand what happened during the last two elections. Nevertheless, certain facts cannot be publicly disclosed for national security reasons. The report, therefore, includes a classified supplement which, in accordance with the law and the Commission's term of reference, is only available to those with the requisite security clearance and who also have a need to know stemming from the performance of their duties. To maximize transparency, I have disclosed as much information as possible in the public report itself, while limiting the information contained in the classified supplement only to what is strictly necessary. This classified information in no way alters the main finding of the report. On the contrary, it reinforces some of those findings. It's important to highlight that the initial report's findings are not necessarily definitive. The Commission will soon begin the second stage of its work, and it is possible that this stage will shed further light or even a different light on some of the events investigated and reported in the first stage. Indeed, the manner in which information about foreign interference was circulated and what measures the government took in response are two issues central to the second stage of our work, which focuses on the government's ability to detect, prevent, and counter foreign interference. Alors, il est important de souligner que ce rapport initial
It's important to note that the initial report contains findings that are not definitive. The Commission will shortly be initiating the second component of this work, and it's possible that it will shed a different or more complete light on some of the issues that were studied under the first component. Based on the information that we have on foreign information, that information has circulated, and measures taken by the government in response are issues that are closely linked to the next phase, and that is primarily the government's ability to detect, prevent, and counter foreign interference.
The findings in this initial report should therefore be understood for what they are: preliminary findings, which may be subject to change upon the completion of the Commission's work. That said, I do not think it likely that the main conclusion in this report will change. Ces conclusions sont exposées et expliquées en détail.
These conclusions are explained and set out in detail in the report, but I will present some at the outset. First of all, our electoral system is robust. Acts of foreign interference were committed in the last two general federal elections, but they did not harm the integrity of our electoral system. The solidity of that system was not shaken. Electors were able to vote, and their votes were duly registered and counted. And there's nothing to suggest that any interference occurred. The foreign interference that occurred did also not have an impact on the identity of the party that formed the government in the last two elections. Those acts of interference that were carried out, some have been established and others simply suspected. But they did not fully affect the electoral process. From what we've been able to determine, when it comes to the number of votes by either candidate in the ridings, it is possible, but I cannot confirm, that in a given riding, some information led to the election of one candidate over another. Whether or not
La
this is
seule
the case,
possibilité que de la désinformation
the
menée
only
ou encouragée par
possibility
une autorité
of
étrangère
misinformation
ait
that
pu
may
avoir
have
un
been
impact
put
déterminant
forward by a
sur le
foreign
résultat dans une circonscription.
interference situation
Et
in a
c'est
given riding.
Qui plus est, cette désinformation,
What is more,
même si elle n'a pas eu
that
un impact
disinformation,
déterminant sur
even
le
if it did
résultat
not have a
dans
determinative
plusieurs circonscriptions,
impact on the outcome
a
in some of the
néanmoins
ridings,
diminué la capacité
did
de
nonetheless
certains électeurs
reduce the
à
capacity
voter
of
de
some
façon
voters
éclairée,
to make an
c'est-à-dire
informed
en
choice.
bénéficiant d'informations
And that means not having
First,
reliable information.
our electoral system is robust. Acts of foreign interference did occur during the last two federal general elections, but they did not undermine the integrity of our electoral system. Our system remains sound. Voters were able to cast their ballots, their votes were duly registered and counted, and there is nothing to suggest that there was any interference whatsoever in this regard. Nor did this foreign interference have any impact on which party formed the government in the two most recent elections. Nonetheless, the acts of interference that occurred, some of these acts have been established while others remain only suspected, are a stain on our electoral process and impacted the process leading up to the actual vote. Although it is impossible to determine whether they had an impact on the number of votes received by each candidate in any of the ridings affected, there is one riding where this information may have led to the election of one candidate over another, but I cannot say for sure. La façon dont l'information a été communiquée à
The way in
certaines
which the
personnes
information was communicated to certain people or certain
ou la
groups,
façon dont elle ne l'a pas été
or the way in which it was not
sont des
communicated,
questions qui, jusqu'à maintenant,
these
m'ont
are issues that
interpellée.
up till now I have examined, and I think that they
Je n'ai pas
deserve
constaté
further
de
reflection.
mauvaise foi de la part de qui que ce soit.
No bad faith was
Mais j'ai
identified on
remarqué des
either
problèmes
part,
de communication
but I did
sérieux
note
et une
serious
certaine
communication
incompréhension
issues and a certain
du
level
rôle
of
que chacun joue
lack of
ou
understanding
devrait
in the
jouer
role that each
dans la
person
lutte contre
plays
l'ingérence
or
étrangère.
should play when it comes to fighting
I
foreign
have found no
interference.
evidence of any actions taken in bad faith, but I have found that there were some communication problems and a certain lack of understanding of the role that everyone plays or should play in combating foreign interference. Les communautés issues des diasporas sont particulièrement
Diaspora
ciblées
communities
par
are
l'ingérence
particularly targeted by foreign
étrangère. Les membres de
interference.
ces communautés
Members of
ont
these
fait état
communities
à la fois de la détresse qu'ils ont ressentie
have noted the
lorsqu'ils ont
distress they
constaté que
felt
des puissances
when they
étrangères
saw
s'acharnaient sur
or
eux
thought that
et de l'impact que
foreign
cela a eu sur
entities
leur vie.
were targeting them and the impact this had on their
Et on ne
lives.
doit pas rester insensible
We
à
must
leur
and
détresse.
we must not remain
Ce qui
insensitive to
précède
that
m'amène
distress.
à formuler quelques observations générales.
And now to
L'ingérence
make a few
étrangère
general
est un
observations.
phénomène réel et une
Foreign
menace
interference
sérieuse.
is a
Il
real
est probablement
threat.
impossible
It is
de
probably
l'éradiquer.
impossible to completely
Nous devons
eradicate it.
toutefois
However,
tout mettre en œuvre pour
we
la
must do
détecter,
everything
la
possible to
prévenir et la
detect,
contrer.
prevent, and counter that.
Dans la suite de ces travaux, la Commission
Following
devra
this work, the
approfondir
Commission
sa
should work
compréhension des
further
mécanismes
to
qui
understand the
génèrent, qui
mechanisms
facilitent l'ingérence
that
étrangère.
manage or facilitate
Nous
foreign
avons pu mettre en
interference.
lumière deux de ces
We've been able to
mécanismes,
shed light
la
on two mechanisms:
désinformation et le soutien financier.
misinformation
Nous devrons
and
pousser
financial
plus loin,
support.
incluant
We must push
en
further,
examinant les règles
and this
entourant
should
la
include
façon dont les
examining the
candidats sont
rules
choisis lors des courses à l'investiture
governing how
et celles
candidates
régissant la
are
façon dont les
selected,
agences de renseignement peuvent exécuter leur travail.
and understanding how intelligence
Nous devrons
agencies
aussi
can carry out their work.
comment les problèmes de
We will have to
communication
examine
au sein du
how
gouvernement
communication
peuvent
problems within the
constituer des
government
obstacles
can
lorsque
become
vient le temps de
barriers
combattre
when it
l'ingérence
comes time
étrangère.
to fighting foreign interference.
Foreign interference is a real occurrence and a serious threat, and one that is probably impossible to completely eradicate. But we must do all that we can to detect, prevent, and counter it. In the next phase of the Commission's work, we will need to deepen our understanding of the mechanisms that generate or facilitate foreign interference. We have identified two such mechanisms: disinformation and financial support. We need to investigate further, including by examining the rules governing how candidates are chosen in nomination contests and those governing how the intelligence agencies can conduct their work. We also need to examine how communication problems within the government may be an obstacle to effectively combating foreign interference. That said, solution to counter disinformation, to improve how information about foreign interference is circulated, or more broadly, to respond to such interference, remain elusive. These are, of course, complex issues in themselves, but a number of considerations make the task particularly challenging in the Canadian context. Protecting national security and the neutrality of our senior civil service are important principles, but they also pose challenges. Plus fondamentalement,
Fundamentally, Canada is a democratic society that is multicultural and that recognizes and protects individual rights and the principle of the rule of law. The right to reputation and privacy, the right to vote, freedom of expression, freedom of opinion are all at the core of who we are. We must also avoid taking measures that would stigmatize some of our fellow citizens. This includes those from the diaspora. All of this will be much more difficult to fight foreign interference, which is generally, but not exclusively, coming from authoritarian countries. To some extent, the battle is uneven. However, does that not mean that we need to give up the fundamental values of our society? That will be a trap into which some would like to see us fall. We need to find ways to identify and respond to foreign interference. Make necessary recommendations is not the easy task.
Canada is a multicultural and democratic society that recognizes and protects individual rights and the rule of law. The rights to reputation and privacy, the right to vote, freedom of expression, and freedom of opinion are at the heart of who we are. We must also avoid taking measures that will stigmatize some of our fellow citizens, particularly those from diasporas. But all that makes it that much more difficult to fight foreign interference, which is generally, but not exclusively, the work of authoritarian regimes. To a certain extent, it is an uneven battle. This is not to say, though, that we should abandon the values foundational to our society. That will be a trap, one that some will be only too happy to see us fall into. Rather, it means that finding ways to identify and respond to foreign interference and formulating useful recommendations for doing so is no small task. Nous poursuivons assidûment nos travaux.
We will continue
Et cet automne,
to work
nous
hard.
tiendrons de nouveau des
fall,
audiences publiques.
We will be
durant
holding
lesquelles
new public hearings in which we will hear from other crucial witnesses, including experts who will help us to understand and identify concrete, effective measures. We will work to identify possible solutions and make recommendations to protect as best as possible our country from foreign interference. My final report will be submitted before December 31st, 2024. In the meantime, I invite you to read my initial report. You will find in it a summary called Highlights of the Report. It's about 15 pages long. And then there are 8 full chapters. I hope that this will help contribute to the public understanding of what foreign interference is and its impacts, notably any impacts that it might have had in the last 2 elections. To conclude, I'd like to invite anyone who has relevant information to provide the Commission to do so through the public call program, which will be implemented soon and accessible through our website.
I also urge anyone who has relevant information to provide it to the Commission through the forthcoming public outreach initiative, which will be accessible on our website. Merci encore de votre présence.
Thanks
et
again
bonne fin
for
de
your
semaine.
attendance, and I
Thank you
wish
again for
everyone a
being
great
here
weekend.
and have a great weekend.